does he do?
Deepwater Horizon, a dramatization of the April 2010 disaster when the offshore drilling rig, Deepwater Horizon, exploded and created the worst oil spill in U.S. history. On April 20, 2010, a massive blowout and a pair of violent explosions on the oil rig Deepwater Horizon irreparably damage and sink the oil rig, resulting in the deaths of 11 workers and releasing tens of millions of gallons of petroleum into the Gulf of Mexico in the U.S. worst ever oil spill. Mike Williams and Caleb Holloway, just two of more than 120 crew members on board the crippled oil rig, frantically try to rescue some of their shipmates and get them to safety, while trying to escape from the burning rig themselves. Let's go to the next story. In the opening of the film, we are introduced to Mike Williams, who that morning they were talking with his wife and his daughter. He is a chief electronics engineer at the Deepwater Horizon, an offshore oil company owned by a Transocean company.
It blocks its sail away to the next.
After the conversation was over, Mike and his wife accompanied him to the port of Fortune. Later on, Mike would depart by helicopter and they would immediately take him to the Deepwater Horizon, which is currently 41 kilometers away from the Louisiana coast. Before taking the flight, Mike met with Jimmy, an installation manager, Andrea the supervisor from ASEAN, and there were two other people, namely representatives from British Petroleum. We'll briefly mention BP. Not long after, the helicopter took off, and when it was almost there, Jimmy looked surprised by the existence of the Bankston ship, which was used to transport the drilling mud. At that time in Horizon there were 126 crew members who were stated to be on duty. When they arrived, Jimmy and Mike immediately asked about the durability test of the cement that was in the drilling hole. However, all the crew on the deck looked confused because the team that used to carry out security tests had left. Confused, he then asked Andrea to directly ask the Bankston officer about his destination. Came there, and from him finally it was known that they would lift the drilling mud, and after that they would go to another drilling place. Even though he had been ordered to immediately release the drilling pipes, Jimmy, as an installation manager, certainly didn't want to take any risks and preferred to ensure safety first. However, it seems that the representatives from BP who were with them also did not know about the report on the durability of the cement. Only when Mike asked the crew who were at the drill, it turned out that BP had pulled the testing officer back before carrying out the test. When asked what was the cause, they also can't be sure why. Jimmy, who felt that BP was in too much of a hurry, then asked him to go up to meet Vadrine and Kaluza to ask directly about the various problems they encountered. Jimmy here even quipped that they, BP, are too cost-effective because they have underestimated the cement durability test, which if the cement cannot cover the drilled hole, it could be fatal for the safety of all the crew. They also explained that the current state of their company was experiencing delays in the delivery of oil, so they were forced to save on costs. Hearing this, of course Jimmy didn't accept it, especially now that a lot of equipment was damaged and had to be repaired first. Even so, Vadrine was confused when Mike explained the details of what equipment was damaged.
All system, pipe rack system, GPS antenna, direct TV system, wireless MRs, because the compressor for the AC on this deck are down too. Who are you? Mike Williams, Chief ET.
Feeling that his input was ignored, Jimmy finally asked BP officials to test the negative pressure of the borehole. Is the cement able to withstand and strong from oil pressure? The test began. All seemed to be preparing in their respective sections. Wrapped in tension, the pressure was finally found at 1395 psa, which was quite high and risky.
Pressure. Enough to cut your car in half.
Open in the upper annular.
Realizing that Jason is the leader in the drilling department, immediately ordered his team to open the drilling pipe valve to reduce pressure. By looking at the results listed on the computer, Jimmy finally confirmed that the test at that time was declared a failure and was risky. But Vadrine actually thought this and revealed that if the pressure was that heavy, why was there no mud rising up the pipe and gushing out of it? until he concluded that the sensor had received wrong data, and he also began to explain that the pressure displayed on the computer was the pressure inside the sensor pipe, which was not the pressure from the drilling hole, and so that everything was clear, he intended to do another test using the pipe. Blockage is no longer a drilling pipe. In the confusion, suddenly two people from BP came and told Jimmy to go to the kitchen room and said if there was a problem there, and after Jimmy arrived it turned out to be a surprise for him, because BP turned out to give an award for the Deepwater Horizon, which has the highest level of safety. For 7 consecutive years, all the crew, including from BP there, seemed to congratulate and be proud of what Jimmy had done so far in leading the drilling ring. While on the other hand, Vadrine and Jason tested the pressure for the second time after a while. The test results appeared and the pressure returned to 0, which means the test was a success and proved that the cement can withstand pressure. Even though Vadrine believed it worked, Jason still seemed to doubt it, because according to his experience the results from the drilling pipe and the blockage pipe should be in sync at 0. However, one person from BP joined in and also defended that it was the drilling pipe that provided the wrong pressure data. Feeling pressured by BP, Jason finally told him the results of his test using Jimmy. Hearing that, Jimmy also became very confused because the worst case could be fatal. But on the other hand, he is also only a worker who was indeed hired by BP. With great hesitation, Jimmy finally gave permission to lift the remaining mud and informed him that he would follow after he got ready. The lifting of the mud began and the Bankston ship was ordered to start approaching. In their respective sections they also look happy because the drilling there has been declared over and they will move to another place. But suddenly Jason was surprised by the increase in pressure and flow that continued to rise. To anticipate this, he immediately ordered his men to stop lifting the mud, but strangely, the pressure continued to rise and get bigger. Panic ensued, not wanting things to get out of control. Jason again suggested to vacate the drilling room and evacuate everything there. Vadrine, who heard this, seemed to ignore it, and Jason was angry and immediately threw him out. Simultaneously, a worker who was outside the room discovered that there were oil droplets. After observing it, it turned out that mud mixed with oil was starting to come out and more and more. Realizing that something was wrong, those outside also started to panic, and in the midst of the panic suddenly the pipe exploded. A burst of mud mixed with oil came out without being able to be dammed, and even through those who were there. Jason, who was in the room, immediately acted quickly by closing the annular to block the burst. Moments later the gushing stopped and Caleb immediately asked if the pipe had been cut. Jason also replied that the burst seemed to be resolved by simply specifying the annular without having to break the pipe. However, it turned out that the pressure was too great and the first annular that had been closed was unable to withstand the burst, and finally a leak started at the bottom and made everyone there panic to immediately prevent the leak. The burst happened again. Jason immediately ordered to close the second annular and again advised everyone in the drilling room to get out. But they looked helpless because the burst that happened was so big. The situation was getting worse. Explosions after explosions began to follow and destroy the mud storage section and other parts. Both those who were in the room began to realize that something was wrong, while on the other side, Andrea was warned about a gas leak that entered every room through the AC duct. Even the propulsion engine could no longer be controlled. Worse yet, the most frightening warning occurred, that the Deepwater Horizon was about to explode. And yes, it happened after one of the machines jammed and exploded, so that the fire started to spread to every room, destroying every room. Even the crew who were near the drilling were victims. Finding the terrible reality, the crew who were on the other side immediately contacted the Bankston ship for help. And the incident was directly connected to the headquarters of the American Coast Guard. They immediately provided assistance by contacting the nearest ship in the area to immediately head to the Deepwater Horizon. On the other hand, after the explosion occurred, Mike was seen breaking free from the rubble and starting to come out of his room. He also found his best friend Doggy had been lying down and immediately helped him go out to a safe place. After arriving outside, it turned out that Jimmy was nowhere to be found. Mike finally decided to return to look for Jimmy. At the same time, the crew of the Bankston ship also prepared a rescue by lowering the lifeboats, preparing medicines and oxygen supplies. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard began to look busy with the explosion of the oil refinery and immediately sent a helicopter there to carry out the rescue. But unfortunately, because of the distance, they were able to arrive in 25 minutes. When Mike met Jimmy, he also informed him that the ship had exploded. Not wanting another explosion to happen again, Jimmy finally decided to break the drilling pipe, and because his eye was injured, he asked Mike to take him to the bridge on this trip. They met a crew who was helping to release a friend's leg that was stuck. Mike couldn't help but postpone his trip and decided to help. Explosions after explosions continued to occur, and soon the situation was made worse because the electricity began to off completely. Luckily, with a little force, they managed to get their legs off the pincers. On the other hand, when the crew started to board the lifeboats, they were suddenly startled by a crane that was bobbing and ready to fall on them. In order to help people, a crew member named Dale immediately took the initiative to stop the crane. But unfortunately, after the crane was in a safe position, the rope on the crane fell off and was thrown at him so that he had to fall down and die. Arriving at the pavilion, Jimmy looks very angry when he sees Vadrine there. But because everything had already happened, he finally ordered him to save himself by getting into the lifeboat. According to the first plan, Jimmy immediately asked Andrea for help to cut the pipe using EDS, but because the burst pressure was too big, the effort to cut the pipe was in vain. The last option at this time is just to keep the pipe from exploding, because if it explodes then the oil will spill everywhere. To anticipate this, Jimmy also suggested turning on the backup generator so that later it can run again and stay in position. Mike, accompanied by Caleb, finally decided to leave. Unfortunately, the fire was raging fiercely, so they had to fight the fire to get to their destination, and after they arrived they immediately turned on the generator. The electricity was turned on, but unfortunately, because of too much damage, the electricity couldn't last long. Without despair, they turned on the generator again. But it seemed that the fire was getting bigger and the collapse was starting to fall here and there. Finally, Jimmy immediately ordered that all get out to save themselves, and unfortunately, when they all arrived, it turned out that the last lifeboat had left.
They left us! Shit.
In a state of panic, luckily they found a makeshift raft and decided to use it. Just as Mike and Andre were about to board, fire suddenly shot out and sent them tossing, while the emergency raft itself fell from there. Because the fire was getting bigger, Mike decided to invite Andrea to go up the stairs and headed to a high place to jump. But when he got to the top, Andrea looked confused and scared, so Mike had to try to calm her down first, because it took too long and Andrea didn't wake up. Mike was forced to drop Andrea first. Luckily, they were able to jump through the fire and Mike immediately pulled Andrea's body away from the refinery. Until shortly afterwards, rescuers from Bankston were seen helping them and hoisting them into a lifeboat. At Bankston, to ensure the survivors, Jimmy began to take attendance one by one from workers, but unfortunately many people did not survive and became the deepest sorrow for all of them there. Not long after that, the rescue helicopter arrived and immediately helped the survivors, while Jimmy himself led all the survivors to pray together. Finally, Mike also received a thank you from Andrea and saw several other families were also there. In his grief, Jimmy and Mike finally hugged each other. Since that incident, Mike Williams has never returned to the sea. Decided to stay in Texas with his family. Andrea lives in California and no longer works for the oil industry. Meanwhile, Jimmy is still working at Transocean. While Guuuyyss and Vadrine were finally charged with accidental murder until in 2015 the case was closed. As a result of the tragedy, it was said that at least 11 Deepwater Horizon crew were declared dead. Salvation is not the only hope that everyone has when they are threatened, but what is more important is how he has a night spirit and is more positioned to help other souls and bring him back to happiness and his family. Hopefully this story can entertain your free time. Now pass your first 3 forms. You look good. Please subscribe, like and share. If you want to know more, can be viewed on my homepage. Don't forget to check out other true stories. Thank you and see you in the next video.